I never expected a simple leather-bound diary to flip my entire understanding of my family upside down, but that's exactly what happened. The moment I opened it and read the very first page, written in my grandfather's shaky, fading handwriting, I felt my stomach twist in a way I still can't fully explain. The words didn't just surprise me, they punched a hole straight through everything I thought I knew about him, about my grandmother, and honestly, about myself. When I finished the first entry, I sat there, frozen, staring at the page like it might rewrite itself if I blinked too hard. And the question that kept echoing in my head was this: if you found out a secret that had the potential to destroy everything your family believed, would you reveal it? Would you risk breaking the people you love in the name of truth? Tell me honestly, would you have done what I did? It all started on a quiet Saturday morning when I drove out to my grandparents' old house. My grandmother had passed away 3 years earlier, and my grandfather followed shortly after. Their home had been sitting empty ever since, and even walking up to the porch felt like stepping into a memory I wasn't sure I was ready for. My parents wanted to sell the place, but before they did, they asked me to help sort through the remaining boxes in the attic. I agreed mostly because I wanted one last chance to walk through the rooms where I'd spent so much of my childhood. Everything smelled like dust, old books, and a hint of my grandmother's lavender perfume, which clung to the curtains like a ghost refusing to leave. The attic was worse. Hot, cramped, cluttered. Boxes stacked like a miniature cardboard city, each one filled with decades of forgotten belongings. I wasn't expecting to find anything valuable, maybe a few old photos or some antique trinkets. But then I saw it. Tucked inside a small wooden chest beneath a stack of yellowing letters was the diary. Dark brown leather, worn edges, the initials AM embossed on the front. My grandfather's initials. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. Diaries are private. They're meant for the writer, not for nosy grandchildren digging through the attic years later. But something about it felt intentional, like he had wanted someone to find it. Like he left it there for a reason. When I opened it, the first entry was dated August 14th, 1963. I expected mundane things, weather, crops, chores, maybe a line or two about my grandmother. Instead, the very first sentence made my entire chest tighten. I don't know how much longer I can hide this from Margaret, but if anyone ever discovers what I did before we married, I pray they understand why. I remember whispering out loud, "What the hell does that mean?" My grandfather was always a quiet, steady man, slow to anger, soft-spoken, the kind of person who never seemed ruffled by anything. What secret could he possibly have had? I kept reading, barely breathing. He talked about a woman named Eleanor, someone I had never heard of before. He mentioned meeting her during a summer job in another town, how they'd fallen in love quickly, recklessly. Nothing like the carefully guarded love story he always told us about him and my grandmother. According to him, he and my grandmother had been sweethearts forever, practically destined for each other. But this diary revealed something very different. He described Eleanor as the first woman I ever truly loved, and I swear, my heart stopped. There was more, so much more. He wrote about her getting pregnant, about how terrified they both were, how they planned to run away together and start a new life far from the expectations of their families. But then something happened, something he didn't spell out immediately. He hinted at a tragedy, something that tore them apart. The deeper I went, the darker it got. The next few pages were smudged water, damaged like maybe tears had fallen on them decades ago. When the writing became clear again, he confessed that Eleanor had died. And not just died, she had died in childbirth. His child. His first child, someone who, according to this diary, would have been older than my mother. My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped the book. I didn't understand how something this enormous, this life-altering, had never been mentioned. No one in my family had ever hinted at anything like this. He wrote that the baby, a boy, had survived, and that the baby had been adopted by a distant relative to keep the family reputation intact. He never named the child. He simply wrote, "I can't raise him. I can barely breathe knowing she's gone." Then he ended the entry by saying he was leaving town, returning home, and trying to rebuild the life everyone expected me to have. That was the moment everything clicked in the most horrifying way. He left the child behind, he abandoned his own son. I know things were different back then, but still, how do you just leave your child and pretend that part of your life never happened? I sat in that dusty attic for almost an hour trying to process what I had just read. And then I kept going. I couldn't stop. As the entries progressed, he talked about meeting my grandmother again, how she pulled him out of his grief, how he'd convinced himself that starting a new life with her was the only way to survive the pain of losing Eleanor. But the guilt ate him alive. There were entire entries where he just rambled about this child he'd never seen grow up. He wondered if the boy would resent him, if he'd ever learn the truth, if he'd ever forgive him. My grandfather carried this weight for decades, silently, while the rest of us knew nothing. There was one entry, one that still haunts me, written years later. He wrote, "I saw him today." Just those 4 words. Nothing else. No explanation, no details. As if even writing more was too much for him to handle. I don't know how he saw him, or if the boy recognized him, or whether anything else happened. The diary never mentioned the child again after that. It was like the rest of his life became a careful act of burying the past so deeply that no one would ever uncover it. Except I did. After reading the entire diary, I didn't know what to do. I sat there on the attic floor, sweaty, emotional, torn between wanting to protect my grandfather's memory and wanting to scream the truth at the world. My mother adored her father. Would this destroy her image of him? Would it break her heart? Would it hurt her that she might have a half-brother somewhere out there? Or worse, what if that half-brother had already crossed paths with us without any of us realizing? I took the diary home with me that day. I know I should have told my parents immediately, but I needed time to think. For 3 days I barely slept. I kept rereading the same passages over and over, trying to understand what kind of person my grandfather really was. Was he a good man who made a devastating mistake in a moment of grief? Or was he someone who ran from responsibility, who built his happiness on a foundation of abandonment? And this is exactly the point in the story where I want to ask you directly, what would you have done? If you uncovered a secret that could shatter your family, would you bring it into the light or let it die with the person who wrote it? Before I tell you what I chose to do next, honestly, pause for a moment and tell me in the comments. Would you have revealed the truth, or would you have protected everyone from it, even if it meant carrying the burden alone? After days of agonizing indecision, something happened that forced my hand. I was sitting in the kitchen, the diary in front of me when my mom walked in. She had come over to drop off some old documents from the house, and she noticed the book on the table. She recognized it instantly. "Is that Dad's?" she asked. I froze. I didn't want to lie. I didn't want to speak either. I think she sensed something was off because she sat down and asked me directly, "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" So I told her. Everything. I didn't read entries aloud. I couldn't bring myself to do that, but I summarized the details. I told her about Eleanor, about the pregnancy, about the child, about the adoption. As I spoke, her face changed in ways I'd never seen before. Shock, confusion, disbelief, grief. Every emotion rushed over her like waves. When I finished, she didn't say anything for almost a full minute. Then she whispered, "He had another child." Her voice cracked in a way that made my chest ache. She asked to read the diary herself, and I hesitated. I really did. But I handed it over. She spent the entire evening reading it in the living room. I sat in the kitchen, just listening to the clock tick, waiting for her reaction. When she finally came back, her eyes were red and swollen. She told me she needed time, that she felt like she didn't know her father at all anymore. The next morning, she made a decision that I still don't know how to feel about. She wanted to find him, the child, my grandfather's first son. My mother said that if she had a brother out there, she needed to know. She wanted to understand her father's pain and choices, not just judge them. With that, everything spiraled into motion. She contacted distant relatives, dug through old records, made phone call after phone call. Weeks passed. Then one evening she called me and told me she had found him. He was alive. He had a family of his own, and he had no idea who his biological father really was. My mom asked me to come with her to meet him. I didn't want to intrude, but she insisted, saying that this wasn't just her history. It was mine too. We drove to his house, both terrified. When he opened the door, he looked normal, kind, confused definitely, but welcoming. He invited us in after my mom explained who she was, and then we sat in his living room as she told him the truth. I watched him process it in real time, the way his face tightened, then softened, then froze altogether. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse anyone of anything. He just sat there quietly and said, "I always wondered why I never looked like the people who raised me." He told us he had spent most of his life feeling out of place, but never wanting to hurt the people who took him in. He thanked us for telling him, but he also asked for space to process everything. Over the next few months, things slowly changed. Not dramatically, not some sudden magical reunion story where everyone becomes one big happy family, but gradually. He started calling my mom occasionally. They exchanged photos, talked about childhood memories, shared pieces of themselves. I met him again a few times, and while it still feels strange, it's also comforting in a way I can't explain, like a piece of our family that had been missing without any of us realizing it. As for my mother, she forgave her father. She said she finally understood the kind of pain he carried, and why he might have felt trapped by the expectations of the time. She didn't excuse everything he did, but she accepted it, and me. I still think about that diary all the time. I still wonder whether I did the right thing by revealing the truth. I still question whether my grandfather intended for this to be discovered, or if I pried open something that was never meant to see daylight. But I also think about my newly discovered uncle, my mother's brother, and how relieved he seemed to finally understand where he came from. So if you ask me now whether I regret telling the truth, I don't. But I still wonder if I handled it the right way. And that's why I want to ask you again, if you found a secret like this, would you reveal it? Or would you hide it to protect the people you love? Thanks for listening to this incredibly personal story. Like this video if you think I made the right choice. Subscribe for more stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. I'll see you all in the next story.